Well, I am a minute early, so we'll wait for a few people to come in. Make sure that I've got my... Hey, Alex. Hi, darling. Oh, hi, Marriott. How are you doing? And everyone comes in. This is great because I have some rosé in my glass from Chêne Bleu. And thanks for everybody chiming in. Hey, Todd, what's going on? All right, so we are bright, and I'm going to give you a wave there, Balsam Fir. So thank you so much for everybody chiming in and joining us for this delightful and wonderful visit to Chêne Bleu. So I'm actually going to give you a little bit of a background on the Chêne. So absolutely delightful photo here of the Chêne Bleu of the Verrier estate, and we are waiting for Nicole to join in here in just a moment. Let's see where she is. So Chêne Bleu, of course, located in the Vaucluse, so just outside of Gigondas, along with in the Dental de Montmorin. So that is the Chêne Bleu and the design that we have made by Nicole and her team. So I am looking for, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thanks for the shout out on my shirt. So we are waiting for Nicole to come in. As soon as I see her come in, we will have her join us. The joys of her being on the other side of the pond and in London. As a matter of fact, I just got off the phone with her. So, maybe she's it's taking her just a minute to get on from her phone onto Instagram. So we're going to give her just a moment, see if we can see some more images. This is a image, of course, of the label itself, which she is going to delve a little bit more into in terms of the design. Really fun kind of a quiz and an exercise that she has, and that is her calling me. So, hi. Yes. Yes, I'm looking for you. It's have you joined the live? I'm looking for your I'm looking for Chêne Bleu. So we've got, there we go. So we just got Chêne Bleu on the line. So give me just a second to find her. We got a lot of people on the call. So there we go. All right, found you. So she should be coming on in just a moment. So we're waiting for, there you are.
Yes.
Hello, my dear.
I'm so happy. This looks like it's actually happening.
It is happening. It is real. We are live, and I really can't wait to hear what's been going on, because give a little bit of a backdrop. We were trying to have you in the vineyard and at the estate. But because of COVID and some other challenges out of our control, where are you connecting with us from?
Do you like my my dining room / office / tasting room /
I love it.
living room? That's how we're all living these days, right? We're
It certainly is. It's multi-use.
Our wines, but also our living spaces. So very exciting to talk to you. Love Wilson Daniels, and thank you for this.
It is our pleasure. So how are things where you are? It's I know that it's an insane time for all of us. But I hope that you're doing well. And how are things at the winery?
Well, we've been adjusting like everyone. You know how Darwin says the survival is not for the strongest or the smartest. It's for those who are able to adjust the fastest. And this is certainly a test, especially in the wine business where, we like to make slow wine and we like to take our time and do things right. And right now we're really forcing ourselves to figure out how to help the people who are most in need, because of course the Psalms are really hurting, and the restaurants, and also the clients who need stuff, figuring out all that setup that you always hear about, where you have the contactless thing, and we're trying really hard to be super ahead of the curve when it comes to making sure that we understand what needs to be done right now, because I don't think you've ever seen such a challenge to small wineries in one fell swoop. Even a bad harvest or some unexpected frost at the wrong moment, or a hailstorm right before you're bringing in your best grapes, nothing really compares to the combination of things that small wineries are going through right now. But
and it's funny that you brought that up, because I know that you had in an article, I believe it was last week, where you talked about, not only buying local, but buying small. So expound upon that, because, it's a really, I think it's a wonderful way of looking at the philosophy of, what's happening to many of these small wineries around the world.
Well, William, I started my professional life as a credit analyst in a bank. It was the 80s, and that's what you did after school for a while to learn the ropes. And I never thought it would come in as handy as it is when you're trying to manage the balance sheet of a small winery. But especially in these terms, I think what you're seeing is a combination of the fact that most people in the wine world have very high fixed costs, especially in small wineries, because they tend to own the land and they farm it themselves. Sometimes the bigger wineries, the négociants, they can maybe buy fewer grapes than they normally would and adjust to demand. So right now you have very high fixed costs, and then you also have a marketplace that's sort of evaporated, because you rely a lot on sommeliers and the trade and the wine shops that are kind of indie guys who really know and take the time to see the small print, to see who the smaller producers are, and the people like you who spend your time explaining what small wineries are all about. They're not necessarily the ones with the fanciest e-commerce platforms. Your small wineries aren't necessarily selling to supermarkets the way the bigger boys are, and as a result, they don't have the access to the marketplace at a time when you have clients who might be really excited about loading up on wine for a lockdown. It's not always the smaller wineries that get access to that. So what you're seeing is a double whammy, and I think it's going to hit even harder a little bit later on in the year, because you'll find that some of the credit problems with payments are going to come through, and demand isn't exactly going to jump up the minute that this is over, because some of those restaurants are still going to have a lot of stock left over and things like that. So we all have to help each other through this. And I was suggesting that some people could really, if they, at parity of price, style, variety, quality of wine, that they look out for smaller wineries. And we're trying to hear from other people who are having particularly hard time. Some of our brothers and sisters in the wine world, make sure that that we're all looking out for each other, and we can help them get access to the resources that they need. We've set up a little helpline, and we're trying to do our part to make sure that we're all in this helping each other. So clients who appreciate fine wine can certainly look out for the little guys.
No, and I appreciate you for speaking out, because you're right. There are many small wineries that simply don't have that voice. But with this new norm and us going to more of a virtual setting, hopefully that will change the game and really help everybody out. So, knowing how difficult it is now, let's actually go back, 25, 30 years in the beginnings of the estate. And, how did you and your husband end up with this estate and all of the work that came into restoring this historic property?
Well, it all started with my husband, who was very excited about finally having put aside his pennies to be able to do what he had always hoped to do, and find a vineyard, and in particular one with a very intense natural environment, because he's very much a conservationist. And his family had retired to that region. He was looking in Chateauneuf and all these classic places. And then he found this little hidden gem way up in the mountains in a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. It's like a natural amphitheater. It's way up at about 1,800 feet, and it is quite isolated, remote. And he loved the fact that in that little enclave, there was this very ancient vineyard, a medieval property. It was in terrible shape. So I pulled out a couple of pictures. This is actually a daguerreotype that he found in the attic of how it was abandoned for 50 years. It was from the 9th century, and it had no water, no electricity. This big fig tree that was growing up in the middle of this part of the living room where the ceiling had caved in, and 2 meters of petrified sheep dung, a big, and we had to take a sledgehammer to take out. So if you can imagine, like, more than even a ruin covered with ivy, it was just a complete shambles. And people have been camping out there for a long time, because of course it was only in the second half of the 20th century that water and electricity started making their way to a lot of these rural big cities. So for him, finding this sleeping beauty was really exciting and terrifying. And when I met him, we decided to embark on this big adventure together. And we were very, very lucky that his sister and her husband, Benedict and Jean-Louis, were able and willing to join us, because she had studied viticulture, he had studied winemaking, and the 4 of us went off on this really terrifying but exhilarating adventure to see what this vineyard could give. The reason he had gotten so excited is because, having come from part of his family in the Jura, being very knowledgeable about winemaking, the idea of having something in a hot climate but high up in the mountains where it's lovely and cool, with beautiful no pollution, and the ability to make wines in a very pure environment, that combination was really, had a lot of potential. The issue, of course, was that it was going to take at least 15 years to get the whole thing off the ground, and it did take just that.
Yeah. Well, to put it into context, I just put up an image of what the inside of the Priory building looks like now. So all of that work that you did into what it looks like, it's a stunning and a beautiful job. Thank you, for restoring that history. So, if anybody did, if you happen to have any questions, anyone out there, feel free to put them in the comment section. We will get to those as quickly as we can. So, with the vines and the property, everything growing at a fairly high altitude, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages with working in this area?
Well, it's not for the faint of heart. If you are considering making wine in a remote location, it has the wonderful advantage that you're not going to have all these neighbors to worry about, people putting chemicals in the ground or in the air. You can really march to your own drummer. You can really focus on your vines and what they need, and build the logic of your vines and your wines around this unique micro terroir. So that's fantastic. It's a huge privilege in this day and age. If you pile into an existing area where everybody's done everything and they have a certain way of doing things, it really can crowd your field of vision quite literally, but also in terms of your creativity, in terms of your ability to think outside the box and be as objective as possible about what those vines need. The other thing that's really exciting is at altitude, you get levels of freshness from the natural acidity that are going to have two main uses that we think are unbelievably essential to why we got so excited. So the first is that you're going to not need to add any freshness to your wine. So you're not going to have to use that tartric acid. You're not going to have to use any of the tricks of the trade to freshen up or liven up a hot vintage, or maybe if you're making a rosé or a white that you want to have that nice crispness, it's going to be coming directly from your grapes. No need to add anything. The second thing is that stylistically, we believe, and this is very personal, that when you have lots of nice, rich fruit from all that sunshine and you get those nice sugar levels that are so desirable, in a hot place like the Rhone, it can get a bit jammy. It can get a bit over the top. The alcohol levels can build up after a few sips. It's got that feeling on your tongue where you're like, that was nice, but too much of a good thing. And so that natural acidity is going to really lighten up and freshen up your palate and have a fantastic juxtaposition with the rich fruit, and they're going to play off each other in a really exciting way. And then the third thing is the aging potential that can come from having such a nice freshness. It really contributes to the natural aging curve of the wines, as does some of the oak and all the other things that you have to support that. So if you're in a mindset to make grand vin, stuff that really can last, that's built to last, that's built to continue to evolve, be very interesting, multidimensional, having grapes that come with residual acidity of that nature is an incredible advantage. There are many problems as well. I don't know if you want me to tell you what those are all about, but certainly working with small yields, which is what happens very much at altitude, can be very challenging. There's weather risk that you don't always have because you'll in the valley, because you'll be harvesting later than the other guys. So there are definitely some problems with it, and having low yields is always economically a big challenge. So you have to make sure you do things right because there's no wiggle room.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think that everyone should be able to see at least a cross section of the Dentelle of Montmorel. So, Nicole, can you tell everyone what Dentelle means and what it means specifically for this area?
Absolutely, and I don't know how that's coming out on your screen, but I'm just going to hold it up here just in case, because it looks like maybe it's hard to see the whole picture there.
Yep.
Basically, this is such an exciting area geographically. You can see here some of the crucial things, and I know that there are some geeky wine people like us on this live, so I just want to take a minute to point out some of the most important things from where we are. First of all, you see that we're on the edge of this tectonic plate here, where the bottom of Europe has smashed into the top of Africa. And you'll notice way up here that you have access through your vines to all these minerals that you would never access if you're down in the valley. And the dentelle, to your question, the reason you see these jagged peaks like that, that is an area that when the tectonic plate smashed and one plate went on its side like that, with the erosion, some of these hard granitic levels have remained and have created these little teeth. So when you say dentelle, people think dentelle means lace in French, so the lacy, jagged peaks. But actually, the etymology of dentelle is little teeth, because that's what it looks like. To see these little, and that's really interesting for climbers who come from everywhere. And of course, they are the foothills of the Mont Ventoux. You know that, right? The Mont Ventoux, which is the giant of Provence. I hope everyone to this area, go to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and if you haven't, that you will, but where you this giant of Provence sticking out like that, because there's volcanic activity in most areas where there's also tectonic activity. So that's the origin of the dentelle, and a very beautiful, very authentic, very wild and rugged area. I hope you'll come and drive around. I'll take you on a little wine safari, back roads through the vineyards. It's really fun to go around there.
Yeah, it looks like we got a little bit of buffering from you, so you know, hopefully that'll correct itself. But can you still hear me fine, Nicole? Yeah, there you go. You know, so you know, with the history of the estate, you know, of course, it was there, you know, far before you and Xavier joined the property. So many of the names of the wines have a rich history behind them as well. So tell us a little bit about the name Alio and how that ties into the estate. Nicole? Let's see if we can get you reset there. Looks like you're having a little bit of technical difficulty on your end. Yep, I am. I have full bars on my end, and it looks like you guys can't hear me. Not a problem. All right, so hopefully everyone out there can hear me as well. You know, just everyone, you know, hold on tight, and we'll have Nicole back on. Sometimes calling from the other side of the world back here. But while we have Nicole, you know, waiting to come back on, if you do have any questions, there's something that you always wanted to know about the property, if you know, if there is something, you know, maybe you ever wanted to visit. Thanks, Alan. You know, you can hear me clear. Hopefully you can hear the rosé in just a moment, as I maybe you don't want to hear me, you know, drinking or tasting this. But as we wait for, there we go, and we will get Nicole back on. But again, if you have any questions, we certainly welcome them. What you see now in terms of a view is the Chêne Bleu itself. And we didn't get a chance. Hi again, Nicole.
Hi, that was interesting.
Well, you know, and that's the beautiful thing about this. You know, sometimes that's why we walk through it. We reset, and you know, we're back to normal. So I do have an image of the Chêne Bleu itself, of the oak. So tell us a little bit about, you know, both the Alio, because that was the question in the history in terms of the estate, as well as diving into a little bit of background on the Chêne Bleu itself.
Absolutely. So Alio is one of our little pride and joys, because when we first got there, people kept saying, well, what are you thinking of making white wines? You're too far south. You know how the Rhone is set up, right, with the northern Rhone and the southern Rhone. Typically, the northern Rhone is much cooler up here, and then the southern Rhone, being all that sunshine, fantastic for reds, kind of tricky for whites unless you're really lucky with your soils. So we were like, well, wait a minute, we're so high up, it's so cool here. The average temperatures in the Ventoux are much less than they are in some of the other parts of the Rhone. And especially at that level, we should be able to try something. So against all the local advice that we received, we put in a bunch of whites, and we started with some Roussanne, some Grenache, some Marsanne. Later, we put a bit of Viognier, which we'll come to. But this one is really fun, because from the very first year, we tried co-fermenting the blend, which is 65% Roussanne, 30% Marsanne, and Grenache Blanc, and 5% Marsanne. Something happened. There was some kind of magic. You don't always get a break in winemaking, especially when you're finding your way and you're working with a vineyard that you're getting to know. And we were so excited because there's something about this wine that for me really pulls together some of the elements that keep me so excited about what we're doing there. So first of all, you can see from that crazy color, I hope it's showing up,
It
that
is.
honey, deep, rich color. And then as you swirl it, and I'll see if that's easier to see, it leaves that sticky residue all around your glass. And immediately you're thinking, this is probably not a refreshing aperitif kind of white. This is likely to be something that's got that sticky texture that's so nice with food. And then you're like, uh-oh, it's from the Southern Rhone. It's sticky, it's concentrated. Is it going to be a fruit bomb? Is it going to be, very over the top in concentration? And the thing that I recommend with this wine that I just love to spend time sniffing, because for all the wine geeks out there, this is the ultimate wine for sniffing, upon layer of aromatics. So why I think it's worth really spending quite a while before you even taste this wine. See if you can try getting all those layers of fresh fruit at the top. That's where ideally you want your little Provençal fruit bowl to sit with all your apricots and your lovely melons and summer fruit. And then a couple of exotic notes, a little bit of that pineapple, papaya. I don't know if you guys like making fruit salads with a bunch of
Done that a
different.
couple of times.
That's a really nice thing to do. And
I
I
should
always
probably do
feel
more
like
of
it's a
that.
bit like the reef on the ocean if you scuba dive, where all those cute little fish are. But then what's nice is you start going deeper and deeper, and it gets darker and darker. First with lovely honey and spices, bit of beeswax, which is of course very close to our heart because we're really into bees, which we can talk about. But then 2015, right? This is our current release. And the reason that it is fun to try these 15s is that we spend a lot of time with putting this in on oak. It goes into demi-muit and it gets a lot of lovely warm smells. And then as it ages, and 15 is when it just starts to happen, you get that next level down. You get the sous-bois, you get all those weird and wacky smells that you would expect to start seeing on an old white Burgundy. And you're still keeping your fresh fruit. So you're just, oh my God, that's the best of all those worlds. So it's very fun from a pure sniffing point of view. If you want to take it to the table with you, drink it. Don't waste it on just regular white fish or something. Really save it for very complex flavors that are hard to pair, like artichokes or asparagus or truffles, lovely white sauces, things that have some texture, some greasiness to them. This is a really great match for that because it has the warm texture, but then it also has that searing freshness that comes through even when it ages, and that really is a counterpoint to anything really greasy. So that's my
No, what I love about
my
that is
personal
that,
treat from Alio.
yeah, no, it's, when you think about the great white wines of the Northern Rhone, it, in many ways, it has that weight that you would expect from, great Viognier or even, Marsanne for Hermitage or Saint-Péray, but it has this tension alongside of it that, allows it to age just as well as any of those regions.
I'm so happy you say that, because right now it's just really coating my tongue in a way that is very enjoyable because it's sticky and it's got that searingness at the same time. And I'm feeling all the way back here, but it's still warm. It's really strange. And I love that tension, that juxtaposition, that contradiction that you're going to get from things that are big and fat and lean and mean at the same time, which is really the signature style of the domain. So thank you for saying that. It's a
Oh,
really
it's
simple wine. I recommend it for people who are really seriously wine geekies. Like if you have a friend who's coming over and you want to have a talk about the meaning of life and have a wine that's going to accompany you your whole night arguing with each other about what you smell in it, what you can taste in it, or just simply coming back to it every 15 minutes and seeing a whole different range of smells that come out at you that you didn't notice the first time. That is definitely a fun way to enjoy Alio.
So this is the Alio. There was a question just came through from Tewkesbury Fine Wines in the UK. So thanks for joining on. So yeah, this is the Alio.
It's just arriving in the US as we speak, I think. We're just going to be rolling it out very soon. And it's going to be interesting to have it make its way to the people who really like to be out there having wines that are not carbon copies of white wines they think they've had before. So it's really for people who like that. If you're just looking for your classic Chardonnay or something that's tried and true, or the Sancerre du jour, you might not be venturing into these slightly more esoteric whites. But if you like to try stuff that is not like stuff you've had before, then definitely it's a great one to try. We were very flattered that it was editor's pick and wine spec. It's definitely for people who like to try stuff that's a bit different.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you talked about that beeswax, and I've got a image of your husband Xavier with his hobby of beekeeping. Because how many hives do you have on the property at last count?
Wow, what a timely question. The reason that it's so timely is that we just tripled the size of our beehives, of our apiary. So he got passionate about beekeeping years ago when he was a teenager, and he started helping a neighbor near him in Salon-de-Provence where he was growing up. And as soon as he could, he put in the hives, which was very soon after we bought the property. And they were doing pretty well. He was looking after them for years, and we had up to 9 hives of our own. And then we had a couple of swarms, things like that. And we wanted to bring back up the number of beehives that we had in conjunction with this work that we've been doing on sustainability. And the reason that are connected is, in our opinion, because the bees really contribute to the propagation of wildflowers and especially cover crops that we keep between our rows, because we're working organically and with biodynamic principles in the vineyard, and all of those things require moving as much away from monoculture as you can to having a very integrated vineyard from a microbiology and a biodiversity point of view. So to have these big rows of cover crops, those 80 to 90% of them are cross-pollinating, and it really helps to have bees. And then, of course, the other part of that a lot of wine people have been reading a lot about lately is how those cover crops create this great habitat for the microbiome, for all those microorganisms, which are going to be really busy digesting the soils and all of that, and transmitting and adapting the nutrients so that they can go into the vines, keep the vines healthy without using pesticides and all sorts of chemicals. But also, and this is the part where our research is going to be so exciting, trying to show how microbiome goes on to transmit the famous sense of famous terroir. So in fact, we launched this crowdfunding, Sustainability was called, in the fall, and we was very happy. There was more than 3 times, I guess 1.5 times oversubscribed. But with that money, we are sponsoring, we're tripling the size of the apiary, and we're sponsoring this research with top scientists from around the world. We have 4 of them lined up to try to show how more bees make better wine. So the fact that you can actually smell that beeswax in here and the honeycomb, for me, is an extra added bonus on top of the work that we're trying to do on the sustainability front to make a roadmap for other winemakers who also don't want to use chemicals.
No, I love that, because we always tend to talk about what makes a great site phenomenal, and only too often when you visit some of these sites, there's an energy, there's a presence there that you can't necessarily put your finger on, but you feel it. and I've certainly done that a number of times while visiting Chêne Bleu and La Verrier. Now, we talked about Alio, but there are other great stories with the red wines as well. So what is the story and the background of Heloise and Abelard?
Well, you're talking about our two top heads. These are our flagships, right? Abelard and Heloise, that are named for the medieval lovers. So some of you may know that they were the most famous French lovers. They were in the 11th century. They had a passionate, fascinating love story with lots of twists and turns. It all ended very badly, as is often the case with those famous love stories. And she was half his age. She was a famous professor, and giving her private tutoring lessons. You can imagine how those went down. They became
Oh, I think that we had another slight buffer on your end. So, Nicole, let's see if we can actually get you back on, because I am unable to hear you at this point. Ladies and gentlemen out there, can you hear Nicole? I just want to make sure before I have her, try to reset her Wi-Fi. Okay. Yep. Let me see if I can call her. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We know that we have this from time to time, so I'm going to call her very briefly. That's the joys of calling the UK. Hello, my dear. Yeah, looks like we've got another buffering issue on your end. There we go. There we go. Go ahead and reset, Nicole, and we will get you back on. And while I am typing, the joys of chewing and talking gum, or talking. So, as we were talking about the biodiversity, and of course that is Xavier working on his the beehives. There she goes. And there we go. We are back on. So this also gives you a chance to see Nicole's sister and brother-in-law in the inset, Jean-Louis the winemaker. So can you hear me fine now?
perfect.
Nicole?
Thank
Wonderful.
you for telling me. I was blathering on about the tragic story of Abelard and Heloise.
And it's one of the most fascinating stories. I mean, sometimes when I recall the story to buyers and consumers here in the United States, they almost forget about the wine for a minute, and months or years later, they remember the story of Abelard and Heloise. Oh my God, these star-crossed lovers that, even due to all of the challenges that certainly Abelard went through.
We're fast forwarding over that part because we're not sure everybody is 18 who's listening to this call. But,
I would hope so.
But it is quite a story, because it keeps reappearing even in popular culture, and there are many references, not just Alexander Pope writing a 40-page poem, or Cole Porter making references to them, but even in Being John Malkovich, there's a very funny reference. Now that you know about them, you'll notice their names cropping up. Some people even name their dogs after them, and the idea of them is just not just this incredibly romantic story, but the fact that each one of them went on to become such an accomplished, important person of their, not just their generation, but of history. She certainly always shows up as one of the top female philosophers in Western literature. He went on to change the history of religion with his writings. And so they were very accomplished in their own right, and they had this cool relationship with each other. And I think that's very much in the style of the times, where nowadays it's a powerful metaphor. And the reason we chose those names was because we were trying to make wines that were kind of yin and yang in terms of the more, you know, feminine and for masculine, but also that when you have them next to each other, they each hold their own, but you can tell the relationship with each other. So distinctive but connected at the same time.
Yeah, they certainly have their own identities, right? You know, so for those that aren't,
come to a surprise live video. My husband didn't know.
oh, Xavier's there with you, wonderful.
But he can maybe come and wave at everybody. Hello, my love. It's okay, you didn't have to shave, it's fine. I think we have a little live video bomber here. So
hi, Xavier, how are you?
This is the famous Xavier, who is at the origin of all of this madness that we've embarked on collectively. And had it not been for him finding this place, I don't know that I would ever have discovered the incredible joys of being affiliated with it. So thank you so much, Xavier, but sorry for interrupting everybody there.
Don't be silly. We thank you for all of the work and the trials and tribulations that have occurred over the last quarter of a century in order for us to enjoy the wines that we have in front of us. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
My pleasure being here.
Yeah, it was not an expected
hospitality.
It was not an expected outcome for any of us, but certainly not for me, growing up in Manhattan and never getting any closer to nature than maybe Central Park. Certainly I discovered a whole new world, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's a whole new nature. Central Park, that is.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, very different than the Dental.
It has a lot more nature than people give it credit for having. I know more than 200 species of birds there, and you would never know it unless you go looking for them. Quite a little biosphere of its own, and certainly now working with the Mont Ventoux scientists and the biosphere there, learning about the layers upon layers of interdependencies that exist in every part of this very natural environment. It's just been a gift that keeps giving. It's quite extraordinary privilege to work with all that complexity.
Yeah, we just had a question, someone asking about when is the Rosé, the 2019, which I happen to have, the bottle right here. It should be arriving really any day now in the United States. So, so a twin there. Wonderful.
Yeah, so, it's hot off the press, right? It's always a late release rosé. In a normal year, when there are no challenges with transportation and things like that, it tends to arrive in the market a little bit earlier. This year, I know there were a few hiccups, although fewer than we were concerned about. But then again, it gives us the privilege of taking our time to make it, because of course we harvest later than other people, right? We're bringing our grapes in October instead of September, and we do a very careful, long winemaking process. We do 5 weeks of cold fermentation with the lees, which is very by doing it very cold and slowing down the extractions, you really the finesse, and by keeping the lees, complexity and texture. But then, of course, we put it 20% on oak for 3 months. And that is one of our little secrets that gives it a roundness in the mouth and a texture that is very distinctive. And I think one of the signatures of our rosé, because there aren't that many rosés that have a bit of a oak treatment. And so that also brings it later into the market. But the side effect is that because of how they're made, they age very well, and you can drink them much longer into their lifespan. They have a very long lifespan. As I've said, and some of you have experienced, we even have done verticals of our rosé back to 2006, and also always recommend drinking the previous year rosé in the early part of the spring, because they're the ones that are just in their full bloom of their drinking period. So no need to rush and guzzle them down by September, because suddenly they'll be falling apart at the seams. They don't tend to do that. They tend to just keep integrating better and better. So this is
yeah. I mean, I've got some 13 rosé sitting in the cellar that I'm not going to touch anytime soon.
oh,
But I
that is
love
such
that.
a vintage.
Yeah, I love that concept of, they are winter rosés. I say that the Chêne Bleu rosé is one of the best pairings for Thanksgiving. It's that time of the year where the vintage that was released in the spring is just then starting to hit its stride. Where losing some of the baby fat, for lack of a better term.
Well, I see a little question popping up there about the lifespan, and I think it looks like it's in conjunction with this 2013. And you're both very lucky to have some of those kicking around, because we really had fun making the 13s. They were the vintage conditions were just so great, and it was quantity and quality in the same time, which very rarely happens, as everyone knows. So 13 is definitely one that would be drinking very, very well right now. I would also say that we've been very lucky in the Rhone with a couple of back-to-back vintages that were quite easy to manage from a qualitative point of view. 17 was a terrible year for quantity. This year was down 25% as well. So in the cellar, it wasn't always easy to be dealing with some very difficult conditions. In fact, we were so worried about the 19s because we had such a hard winter. It was very cold. We had two huge bouts of rain. We had frost. It was not an easy year in the vineyard. And yet we were sort of saved by the bell right ahead of harvest, where suddenly conditions really cleared up. We had some fantastic sunshine, and luckily for us and for many people in the region, 19 worked out pretty well. Although I have to say, by that late in September and October, a lot of people have been wrapping up their harvest. I hope they had some good conditions as well, but I think the 19s are going to be really great.
Yeah, I mean, you do have diabolically low yields on the property. And talking about the rosé, we haven't spoken about another rosé that you also make, the Pontard. So that in itself was a fascinating story, working with arguably one of the most famous winemaking families on earth. So tell us a little bit about that.
So that project is so much fun, the Pont des Arts, and the privilege of working with Paul Pontalier, rest in peace, obviously, one of the great losses to the wine world, his premature death at 59. But he, I think, for 30 years reigning over Chateau Margaux, what a great man. We all miss him, and what a privilege to be able to select wines with him, and have him figure out with Jean-Louis exactly how they wanted to make their blends. It was really one of the great treats of our professional life. And his son Thibault, who's so talented, who's so dynamic, and although he's only in his, I don't know, early 30s or something, really a very, very interesting person, one to watch, one of those young people who's really going to make their mark on this next generation of wine or anything he undertakes. I think just working with very exciting people who do very exciting things to a high standard is always an incredible learning experience, and very much what we hope to foster at the winery, because we try as much as possible, and it's not always easy to get people there in the first place, but we find once we're there that they really enjoy this crazy environment, like a wine lab, where everyone is brainstorming and exchanging ideas and learning from each other. It's very collaborative. It's very open. none of these big egos. And even for people like Paul or Alain Graillot or others who have worked there with us, I think it's somewhat liberating, because when they're in an appellation that has a very set way of doing things, even when they're top dog, they don't have always experimenting, rethinking, trying new things. And that's a very fun thing that we try to offer them when they venture off the beaten path to work with us on things. And we hope we'll always keep that in our DNA, in our way of solving for things. Certainly iterative, trying new things, making mistakes, crying, starting again, but not resting on our laurels.
Certainly emotion involved in making wine. So we didn't even talk about the the label again, Pont des Arts. So we've got Marcelo, the artist, his image behind in front of one of his works. So give us a little background on him and how he works within this project.
So one of the fun parts of Pont des Arts is that they work. So the colleague of Thibaut Pontalier was this wonderful young man, Arthur de Villepin, who was the son of Dominique de Villepin, the famous French prime minister, and who had a great art collection. And through his father, the son had access to amazing contemporary artists. And then through Thibaut and his father and their connections, they had access to the winemakers that they felt were good matches, good fits for these incredible artists that they were working with. And we were very flattered to be tapped for one of these projects, two of them actually, a new one coming out soon. And so this Miguel Barceló, who is very fiery personality, and it comes through in his artwork. He has that that very wonderful Spanish strong temperament. And what he's done is interpretive a lot of classic motifs, maybe even not just from Spain, from around the world, but in particular the one that we were paired with was this incredible scene of the bullfight that he created with a toreador and this big bull full of strong muscles. So looking at that painting, seeing the fiery tones, seeing the muscular bull, that's how we got to this idea of using our old vine Grenache, the very gnarly, big roots, lots of rootstock, and the similarities between the bulkiness of those old vine Grenaches and then this bull. That was where the thinking started. And I think it's quite unusual, if I'm not mistaken, to make a rosé with 100% old vines. And I have to say that it was a lot of fun.
So in that sense, the rosé is compared to the Pont d'Art, how do they differ from an organoleptic standpoint? You know, what do you get in the Pont d'Art that you don't necessarily get in the more widely available rosé?
They're really apples and oranges, as they say in America, chalk and cheese, as they say in England. They're not designed to be in relation to each other. Their biggest differences is one, as I mentioned, ours, the regular Le Rosé uses this oak backbone that we talked about, and the other one doesn't have any oak. Ours is a blend to try to keep working on lots of different aromatic dimensions to the wines by bringing in not just the Grenache and the Syrah, but also that Cinsault and a bit of Mourvèdre, which is very fun for us, and a little splash, or a big splash in the case of the 19s, of Vermentino, of Rolet, normally about 5%. On a couple of hot vintages, like the 19s, we have about 12% to add to the freshness without having to use any trickery in the winery. And the big difference as a consumer trying the wines is that one is really to showcase, the Pont des Arts is just to showcase what this old vine Grenache can say for itself without any extra anything. It just comes through in all the dimensions of this quite complex Grenache. This one, ours, is really going more for very different style. It's trying to be a bit of a crowd pleaser, find its way between all these different styles, not too rich and concentrated as you might find with some of the iconic rosés that we love, but they're not really versatile necessarily. They're kind of showstoppers in a very interesting way with certain pairing combinations, a bit more like our Aglio wine. But from a practical point of view, this one can go with everything. You can have it with all your mixed flavors and buffets, and it's not too this and it's not too that. So it kind of slips in aromatically between all those extremes. And the other one is intended, the Pont des Arts is intended to really be a quite unique, unusual expression of our vineyard.
Wonderful. Well, I'm thinking that because what the last vintage that we received, I think we've got some 2015 of the Pont des Arts in our New Jersey warehouse. So I know yet another rosé that ages beautifully. So we saw some images, you know, of the family, and it truly is a family operation at Chêne Bleu. Where do everyone's what are their, what does everyone do on the property, and what positions do they hold?
So it does feel very much like a family affair, even though the team has grown substantially, and there are several people there now. We have a bigger team, and everybody in it is part of that family and has very important roles. It's like a little ecosystem of its own, because in a small company people rely on each other so much. It's like being on a ship or a boat. Everyone has a place, but everybody has to spin and help the other people when there's a situation. So when my husband and I embarked on this, and Jean-Louis and Benedict were willing and able to join us, we also had a lot of help from his other sister, or their other sister, Isabel, who helped so much with the construction. She's also a very talented painter, and she ended up painting a lot of the frescoes in the 9th century part, and she's gone on to now be restoring the frescoes at the Palace of Prince Rainier in Monaco.
Wow.
She teaches that now, and but today she was at the property helping us fix up some paint jobs on. Very happy that she's still involved. We also were so happy that some of our kids have taken a real interest in the business. And first it was the son of Jean-Louis and Benedict, Hugo, who studied to be a winemaker and is now an assistant winemaker at the property, and his daughter, and my husband's daughter, Danielle, who is extremely wonderful person to work with, because she studied classics at Cambridge, and we thought she was on a track to be ivory tower intellectual, and suddenly she came to us and said, "I've been thinking, can I join you in the winery? It would be so exciting." And bringing her on board has been an incredible privilege as well. And then there are people who joined us very, very early on, such as the wonderful Laura Iverson, who you all know, who's an integral part of our project, had a lot more winemaking experience than I did, and wine world experience. And having her join us from the start, I mean, she's family too. And luckily now it's expanded to having a fantastic team. So we are very lucky that people who come to work for us, it's always a very deliberate choice. Nobody kind of happens there. Nobody shows up not knowing what they want to do. They've already done their research. They're ready to go off to this very remote place and take on their part of raising the barn, pulling this project up from nothing to hopefully some very exciting things. So they're there with their real, heart and soul invested into it, and that risks us a lot. And we need all the help we can get. So
that is true. Well, unfortunately, we are about run out of time. We have about 10 seconds left. We certainly filled up our hour. I cannot thank you enough, Nicole, for everything that you do, and stay strong out there on the other side of the pond.
We love you. We love Wilson Daniels, and we really hope that you will continue to work with us and continue to bring our little winery to the attention of all these fabulous people in the US. So thank you so much, and thank you for your encouragement.
Anytime. All right,
thank
guys.
you people who have left all those nice messages too. I really appreciate it. It keeps me going, and that really makes all the